An announcement before the talk. Yesterday, in talking about meetings, I forgot to mention the 10 minutes. It was mentioned in the balcony, but I didn't enter in on it again, which I usually do. With so many people here, it's important that we do keep, if possible, to the 10 minutes. I brought an extra little clock, which was given to me this fall in Germany. It's very slender and unobtrusive, which I have placed at the end of the table so I can see it without having to turn my head. And the other clock is there for you to see. Sounds formidable. But it's good that both of us keep track of the time. It's both of our responsibility to start and end the meeting. If it does go over some, then maybe next time we'll go under some. And also there's the possibility of adding 2 10-minute meetings. That was mentioned. Said that the meeting lasts 20 minutes. All in all, there are 5 opportunities to meet, either individually or in a group, whereby each group meeting that one attends counts for one of one's 10-minute meetings, even if it goes for an hour. This is the first day of the November 95 7-day retreat in Springwater. And we will start right out at the beginning. To talk about listening. Whether in this retreat, at this moment, there can be a new kind of listening, which entails, doesn't it, to look at our conventional, normal way of listening to each other, to a talk, to the birds, or the breathing. And we will enter into this question together whether the person who happens to give this talk here needs to be made into an authority, or whether there can be a different relationship between us. Not that conventional one between student and teacher, or listener and authority. Whether there is an altogether different kind of relationship. That can begin to sprout and flourish. Which of course is completely connected with the quality of listening to each other, to what we say and what we do, and to the breathing, the bird calls, the occasional movements in the room, a sigh or a cough, thumping of a door, rattling of a window. How do we listen this moment? Is the mind already set with expectation of what it wants to hear or what it is afraid of hearing, based on memory and the anticipation that comes out of memory? Take this first talk. These talks have been going on for many, many years. The retreats have gone on for many, many years, and it's usually starts out with a talk on listening and authority, relationship between each other. If indeed there is any between, we'll question that. So we've talked about this for years and years and years. Has the mind produced a receiving set? Oh, this is the day she talks about listening and authority. I know what she's going to say. Does not need to be said disparagingly. But is there a mindset to hear about what is being remembered or expected? An anticipating, expecting mindset does not allow for open listening. A few things may get past it, but usually it's already a filtration. I know what he's going to say. I know what's in her mind. I remember. And there's a structure there through which listening takes place. Now, this is not something to believe because somebody's sitting here in front of an audience with a microphone says it. It is all of what is being said is offered for examination, alone and together, not to be accepted or taken on faith alone. Is it true that expecting something affects the listening? That's a big question which can sit there on the back burner of the mind, allowing to discover that yes, it is so, or maybe no, it isn't so. Expectation need not interfere when expectation is being seen, when it becomes transparent. Then it does not have the same power as when it is operating unawares. And maybe sometimes when one is present in a discussion, someone says something, someone else responds, and there's a division operating. People cannot get together. If one observes what goes on in a discussion, one need not take part by contributing something. One just needs to listen and learn tremendously. One can then feel that people are expecting things of each other or insisting on what they know and therefore don't hear each other. And the irritation or conflict, controversy is on and continues. Sometimes, if one was listening openly without a vantage point to other people arguing or discussing without getting together, maybe one can say, wait a minute. This is not what he said, or this is not what she said. Let's start over again. We don't need to defend our structures, which are already in the way of this amazing quality of open listening. So right now, and sitting here, some words are being said. How do we hear? Are we hearing? Are we listening? Letting the expectation become transparent and therefore out of the way. It's not as easy as that, because a lot of things we're so used to thinking in certain terms which are self-defensive and projecting our image, clinging to the image of the person who's talking, and not yet aware of that. It happens more and more over time, becoming aware of the finer and finer layers of habitual assumptions about ourselves, each other, which narrow and encrust the free flow of communication. Our whole feeling of existence is tied up with it, because at this point we may be strongly identified with our position, our needs, our knowledge, our expectations, strongly identified that without that, what am I? Help! I'm drowning, or I'm disappearing. And thought manufactures a danger in this structureless listening, because I have no existence in that as I know myself. Is that so? The insight into that needs to come and does come for ordinary human beings like you and me. No one can do it for another. All we can do for another is watching carefully and try to put into clear words what it is that is being observed, realizing how difficult it is for clear words to come when the vision is blurred. Often in talking with each other, we say, well, I can't find the right words. But what is more often the case is that I don't see clearly. It's not clear, and therefore the words are blurred. Don't quite fit accurately. And to be aware of that, not to feel guilty about it or defensive about it, rationalize it away or rationalize it to stay. And to see all of those, what one could call extraneous movements of the mind, to keep going this idea of myself as a person who is in the know, secure, well defended, and to be accepted as such. Or questioning the whole thing. There's a great stark beauty in this. Questioning everything about oneself and each other, while keeping listening and observing, maybe in a fresh light of no acceptance or no rejection, but just wondering what really is going on. discovering a fresh importance, a fresh meaning in coming directly upon what is going on. Not what I think is going on, or what I believe is going on, or expect to be going on. But what's really happening, this moment of wondering. Has one heard what has been said to say, get rid of expectation, get rid of opinion, get rid of comparison, of image, or else you can't hear, because this is not what was said. What was said is that we hear according to well-entrenched patterns. And one of the well-entrenched patterns is to hear from someone on whom authority is projected, someone giving a talk. While everyone is quiet, everyone else is quiet. Authority is projected on this person. And there is the well-entrenched expectation that the person will tell us what is right to do and what is wrong. Even though this may not be said, we hear it that way. It's amazing and marvelous to discover. Because all discovery is marvelous. It comes out of insight, directness, not wanting or fearing. So, can one examine for oneself in the course of this retreat whether in fact the listening expects to hear what is right to do and what is wrong in what I've done or I'm doing, and therefore already twisting the words that are spoken in a talk like this to match that pattern of right and wrong. It's wrong to have expectation, it's bad to have images. And the equally well-entrenched reaction, if it's bad, get rid of it. Try to get something else in its place. And then the question, how do I get this something else in place? The proper listening, how do I do it? It's a very subtle thing that when we talk here about listening through expectation, through comparison, through self-image and that in its defenses, that when we talk about all of this, we're not judging it as bad, unworthy, in need of being conquered or banished, annihilated. These are our established reactions to be brought to light in the course of this dialogue together, if you will. The amazing thing about wondering and inquiring into this human being, this body-mind, the amazing thing is that all that is needed is to see what is, not to do anything about it. the directness of seeing, when it is unfettered by judgment and reaction, the directness of seeing is intelligent. Completely, intrinsically intelligent and compassionate. It is not out to kill, to thwart. It's out to discover and see what is true. This moment of listening to the fan and the sounds of cushions, benches, breathing. Maybe some snow sliding from the roof, sliding from the roof. A deep breath or a shallow breath. Is it there? So simple that nothing more is needed to be added to it. How simple can the perception be, the listening, the looking, the inner wondering and sensing? So simple that it brings to light all the well-entrenched assumptions, not all of them necessarily. At times it's so clear that it's all clear what is assumption, not this and this and this and this and this, but what is assumption and thinking and what is free of it, not through battle and conquering, but the clarity of simple, pure listening. So one could say, well, if that's all that's needed, what's the use of talking about it or listening to talks? What is the use of it? It's an amazing phenomenon that even though the intellect can quiet down and not interfere with direct looking and listening, it has an inbuilt urge to put into language that which is being discovered. To communicate with each other. We are social beings. We live together. Very few of us live in total isolation. We are communicative beings who love each other's presence as well as hate it. But we also have a deeply felt urge to share when we discover something that has clarity and beauty and truth. And it couldn't happen without the intellect being able to find the right words and language to express that which is clear this moment. And has that clear expression, or fairly clear expression, does it have any function in our lives? Not to say yes or no out of opinion or the need to take a side for it or against it, but to watch. Does it in fact help to see something if something has been clearly formulated intellectually? Or at least can that formulation of something that rings so true but is so hard to see for oneself, so hard to discover directly, does that formulation sort of keep reverberating in the mind? Is it really so? What is he talking about? What is she saying? It sounds right, but I can't see it directly. And this thing reverberating, being carried in the mind as an unresolved inquiry. I don't know what function it has, but there may be some function there of directing the mind, making it more clear when this situation actually happens. Because what we talk about here are all situations that actually happen. These are not, how do you say, fantasized events. So, what we talk about, the expectation or hearing someone say something in terms of right and wrong, judgment, get rid of it. One hears it, and then when it actually takes place, there it is, it's seen. Because there has been some occupation with it by remembering what was said or being discomforted by not understanding it. There's a certain tension set up throughout the body-mind, yearning to be resolved, released. Does that aid in seeing something directly? Many people say, yes, it does. I myself have always loved to read clear expositions, descriptions of what goes on for human beings, not wishful thinking or moralizing, fantasizing. That has never turned me on in this kind of literature, spiritual literature. But clear description, which when senses comes for the author out of clarity of insight, not clarity of tradition, but insight, this moment. Not that traditional formulations never come out of insight. I did not say that. Of course they don't. It's usually the perpetuation and the repetition that becomes mechanical of something that was not mechanical at all at the time of its inception, its birth. So in walking around, when we take a walk through the woods or down the driveway, maybe stopping at the creek, what is the sound? The sound of water. And the sound of listening, because the two of them are not separate. The sound of listening is the sound of water and wind, creaky trees and branches, and footsteps in the mud or snow or on ice. That's the sound of listening. Blue jays calling is the sound of listening. And as one will find, it doesn't usually remain the pure sound of listening. Caw, caw, caw. Splattering of water. I can't imitate it. There comes the evaluation. First of all, the word. And it's all right. The word crow, the word creek, and rocks, and splattering, and gushing. These words need not disturb the listening. They need not. The listening can remain open. But until there is some stability in the openness of listening, the words and reactions and judgments close it up, and one finds oneself in one's habitual tunnel of liking and disliking and comparing and worrying about the future, in which I may not hear the way I'm hearing right now. Once I get home, how will I be able to maintain this purity of listening that you talk about? It hasn't even happened yet, and one is already worrying about losing it. That's how the mind operates, and it keeps this body in dismay, in disarray, which becomes palpably noticeable if for moments there is some clear listening and seeing connections between thoughts and physical reactions. Reactions are not just mental, they are mental too. But every thought and every mental reaction elicits a physical reaction of rigidity, tension, pain, fear, anxiety, wanting, pleasure, pleasurable thoughts of what I have or what I will have or had. Can one discover these subtle, almost instantaneous reactions of the physical organism to the thoughts? Usually the thought was so quick it escaped notice. And now the body is churning with anxiety. Sometimes one will protest. There's no thought or memory involved. There's just the body is anxious. It's natural, or it's this or that. There may be a resistance to inquiring about connection with memory. But it's not an act of will to see these things. They do become more and more transparent, these connections between an angry memory, a memory of an angry incident, and physical manifestation of anger. And to listen in, to tune in, as it were, to how word and story keeps this anger going, which was mobilized by a memory. Maybe a non-verbal memory. One saw something that visually, or heard something acoustically that evoked strong feelings of anger. And all of this is recorded in the memory, not just of the brain, but the body itself stores memory of its past experiences, which are evocable. Now, we don't realize it's the past vibrating. Nothing here right now that needs to incite to anger or anxiety. But the body doesn't know this. It feels something is here to make me angry. Something is here that is dangerous. And it's all the manifestation of the past in the present through an elaborate, sensitive organism that can store, it seems, ad infinitum what happened in the past and reproduce it faithfully if triggered by whatever memory triggers it, verbal, chemical, physical, visual, auditory. It's all one immense interplay. Organism does not come in parts. We only label it in parts. It's one whole, one functioning whole, not separate from what we consider the outside of us. So in coming to a retreat, a few people reported that doubts have already surfaced before the finish of day one. Why am I here? What am I doing here? And wanting to go home. These doubts arise, particularly when there's a breakup of the usual, of the habitual. Habits have a function to make us feel secure and comfortable and unquestioning. And all of a sudden one finds oneself in a place where not many of the habits are supported. One's living quarters or sleeping quarters are different. One shares the room. Maybe it's not as warm as at home. And it seems so meaningless just to sit down. For what? With what? What am I doing? Can there be a listening into all of this turmoil of wanting habits and the doubts that come up as thoughts, and how the body reacts to these doubts with feelings of uncomfortableness, and that uncomfortableness generating thoughts of removing oneself, going back home where it isn't any different. One came here because why? So, in being here, alone and together, can we be quietly with the whole thing of turmoil and agitation and movement for and against? Find, as it were, the center of the hub in this tumultuous wheeling around, whirling around, from this thought to that thought, from this memory to that memory, and anticipation and judgment. Find the center of it, the still point, the eye of the tornado. In which everything is allowed to happen as it does, with some measure of quiet listening, not knowing for what or for whom. That's the beginning of quietness, not knowing for what or for whom. Just the fan rotating, the breathing in and out, the sounds of people around one. An occasional crack in the woodwork and call of birds. Shall we still ask this question? What is our relationship with each other? Can one observe the desire or the actual happening of establishing authority in someone else? And then relating to that person through the image of what has been created, the authority, the teacher, and myself as whatever that image is. One can question it and discover for oneself the whole gallery of images that we are for ourselves, in our minds and bodies. And wondering if it's possible, at least for minute moments at a time, time doesn't matter, can we relate to each other without images? Without the need to be something for each other, and just be in a simple way which happens to be very creative, without any particular predisposition or premeditation. This instant of listening, the gentle murmur of the fan, the breathing, heart beating, feeling hot or feeling cold, physical pressure where the knees touch the mat, sensations where the hands touch each other or the thighs. This moment of simple openness. What are we? And what are we in relation to each other? We will end here for today.